Okie day, peeps. Let me get this in its proper sector. Okay, coolness. Get this a little bit. It still does not feel like as bright as I would like. But that's all gravy, y'all. Oh, I am super hot now. All right, so obviously I'm going to give a few minutes for peeps to filter in. And I know this is significantly rougher than than when we normally get this sort of thing going. But yeah, it's going to be a busy Saturday. The horror show is actually getting together this evening as opposed to our typical Sunday, which is when we do the predominance of our filming. Cecil has some stuff going on mañana. So I have this live stream, then I've got band rehearsal, and then going out to film with Cecil. So it's going to be a very busy day, but very curious to discuss this because I know there are, as I all too often say, Richard, what is going, dude? Hello as well. Give a few minutes, obviously, for everybody to filter through. And I'm going to share this linky dink, and then we will get to discussing Dreamcatcher. Not to be confused with the multiple movies entitled Dreamcatcher. So, yeah, there is the Stephen King adaptation that Lawrence Kasdan did. But then there's Dreamcatcher spelled with a K. And then there's also, this past weekend, actually, yesterday on Friday, another film called Dreamcatcher. I don't know. It's obviously just its own thing. Dreamcatcher for the win, says Mark Pearson. Mark, I hope you and your awesome little child are doing well. Good, sir. Corey, what is up, dude? I saw your message this morning. I have yet to get to the listening sort of thing, but yes, I look forward to checking out what you are rocking, good sir. And I'm just sharing this, but pages of notes, as per always, with my little dino notebook of sorts. So yeah, look forward to discussing this and getting it going. Just going to share it on the social media stuff, most notably the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group. But yeah, so busy day ahead of me and very excited about that, obviously. But yeah, man, what a week for King news. I guess in the preamble, before we actually get the review started, how about that Talisman news yesterday? You know, the interesting thing about the Talisman is that they've been trying to make that goddamn movie for years at this particular point. No, not just years, decades. So apparently, since, you know, King was a hot commodity in the early 80s, Steven Spielberg and his Amblin Entertainment purchased the rights for the Talisman 2 years before the Straub and King book even came out, and they've just been sitting on it. And you know that the rights lapse if you don't pay the money to renew over and over and over, and Spielberg has paid over and over and over to renew that. Most notably, before we got the news about this Netflix series that the Stranger Things guys are working on, one of the main peeps behind The Handmaid's Tale, which is the Elizabeth Moss show that everybody tells me I need to watch, that I've never watched, unfortunately. Yeah, it was supposed to be a feature film with one of the peeps behind Hulu's Handmaid's Tale, and that obviously fizzled in the meantime. But, you know, I mean, The Talisman is something that most definitely, in my estimation, needs to be a television series, just like the goddamn Dark Tower needed to be a television series. Seriously. But in any event, I'm just going to finish this little posty thing, and we will be good to go. Live order. One thing I did not do with regards to Dreamcatcher, as I'm finishing up this post, I deliberately did not watch the film because I have given so much hate to that film and to this book, but as opposed to doing the compare and contrast and all of my issues with the Lawrence Kasdan film, I was like, nope, I am just going to read the book and not do any sort of comparison in that regard. And that is exactly what I did. So have my estimations, have my insights changed about this? I guess we are about to find out shortly after I've got this all set to gear, which I usually give it about 5 minutes, and we've got a dozen people in there. Obviously, if you guys are chilling and down to talk Dreamcatcher, give that little thumbs up button. It helps us in that algorithm-y stuff. So yeah, okay. Turn down the volume. Although pump up the volume, I love it loud. That's what I prefer to see. But all right, let's see who else is chilling. So Richard says, not much, actually just starting the Institute not that long ago. The Institute is an interesting one. It was basically Sai King trying to out Stranger Things. Stranger Things is how I've described it various times. I did not dislike it, but I don't know. Aside from the great camaraderie with the kids that Sai King brought about, I wasn't like blown away by that particular book. But I know a lot of peeps that just loved it. They're trying to make it into an AMC series currently, so just something to keep in mind. What else we got? Joseph is in the house. Hey, Fuego. Haven't caught you guys live since I was on a deployment in 2017. Glad to see you guys are doing well. Yeah, we're doing solid, man. Lots of exciting things in the pipeline for the relaunch of the channel, and yeah, good to go. Angus, you were posting like crazy on the Facebook last night, man. What's up, Fuego? Still haven't read this one, but don't care about spoilers, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts. And Corey says, you're good, man. Please keep in mind I'm not a drummer. Okay, and then B-Rad Loves America. Hell yeah, Fuego. Perfect timing. Laughing out loud. Okay. Well, you know what? We've got a does chillaxing, and since I've got the bandmates on their way over, as opposed to anything spiritus, I've got my coffee, my caffeination session, and we will get this rock-a-lockin' here in a sec. So, all right, everybody, let's do it to it. Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower. It's Jaime and Fuego. If you please, you join me here for a bit of palaver on Hail to Stephen King. That's Reezy, my favorite author. As all of you know, if you were tuning into this program, in all likelihood, the first Saturday of every new month, we do a live segment of this, live book of the month, and none other than Dreamcatcher. Yes, this is a book I've talked a lot of shit about. I have proclaimed it various times, along with Bag of Bones, as my least favorite Stephen King book. Now, just to keep in mind, Dreamcatcher is, in my estimation, at least leaps and bounds above Bag of Bones as far as quality goes. But yeah, it's not one of Sai King's best. And yet, just celebrated its 20th anniversary. This book was originally released on February 20th of 2001. So it was the February book of the month. And I will be announcing the March book of the month here at the end of the live stream today. But yeah, everybody, I obviously want some thoughts from y'all who are tuning into this broadcast a few hours earlier than normal. We do typically do this at 12 noon Pacific time, but since I've got the band coming over and some filming with the horror show this evening, we had to push it up a few hours, so I hope that is okay for all of you. I'm hoping this will actually gain some more of the overseas audience, which I think is like 10 to 12 to 14 hours ahead a lot of the time, so yes, hopefully that will be the case. But yeah, so February 20th, 2001, this was Sai King's first book after he was ran over and, well, he wasn't nearly killed, but goddamn, was he messed up pretty significantly. And so he said in various interviews that he couldn't really like get up to the computer, word processor, typewriter, whatever he was using at that particular time. And so he wrote this entire near 620-page monster. I believe it's 617 at the end of the day. Yes, indeed. Yeah, he wrote this sumbitch freehand, man. So over 600 pages in cursive by hand. And I believe it was either 2004, 2014, any event, very many years later, Sai King said that he does not like this book. And I can kind of understand why, because of the fact that his injury was so fresh, and he actually put a lot of that negativity and cynicism into the storytelling here in this particular book. So I can understand why, he says you write what you know, and he most definitely did that here. He was writing what he knew, and he knew a lot of pain at that particular point in his life. And I feel like it really comes out in the writing, especially in like the initial half of it. Now, this is a book, in my personal opinion, that loses significant steam in the second and the third act. But, I appreciated this a lot more this particular reading. Now, that doesn't mean I don't still have significant issues with it. But yeah, man, I actually enjoyed Dreamcatcher significantly more this time than I did. It had been almost 8 years since I read this book. When I was doing my initial journey of everything Sai King published, I did not read this in its published order because of the fact that I had already read it. So basically, just to give some insight, when I realized that there were a couple stories that tied in directly with Derry, and with it being one of my personal Sai King favorites of all time, I was like, okay, I have to read everything else that is either set in Derry or closely connected with Derry. So what did I do? After reading it, I checked out Insomnia, and then I checked out Dreamcatcher. And I don't know. I appreciate a lot about Insomnia, and yet, as much smack as I've talked about Dreamcatcher, I found a lot more to appreciate in this, despite the fact that I feel like it is a significant rehash of a lot of Stephen King ideas. It's basically, it's It meets the Tommyknockers with a dash of The Stand, and yet nowhere near as good as any of those. There's a lot of Dreamcatcher apologists, as I mentioned. I am a Tommyknockers apologist, Guard and Bobby, and I love that story. And it's interesting how every like 10 to 15 years-ish, King decides he wants to write something about aliens, because Tommyknockers was November of 87. This was February of 2001, although he started writing it in, I think, May of 2000, so shortly after the accident. It took him 6 months to write this. And just a few years later, in March of 2003, we had that absolutely atrocious Loris Kasdan film, which had so much talent involved. I mean, we're talking Thomas Jane. We're talking Timothy Olyphant-Tastic. We're talking Jason Lee, Morgan Freeman as Kurtz. Like, this was a stacked production, and yet, goddamn, does that movie suck. And it just breaks my heart with all of the just very capable people involved. What happened? I think it really traces back to the source material, personally. But, that is just my estimation. So this was obviously written by King, and then the audiobook. So I always read a book, and then I listen to it as well over the course of the month, just to give like proper perspective, because King is a big championer of audiobooks. And Jeffrey DeMunn is the one who read this, and I know my dude Andrew Thompson is a big fan of the audiobooks as well. So shout out to you, Andrew, if you see this later on or whatever. Book was originally called Cancer, something to keep in mind, which is a little amusing. And then Tabby was like, "No, Steve, you are not writing this book as being titled Cancer. That is not happening. No, sirree, Bob." Although I feel like the title Cancer makes a little bit more sense within the context of the storytelling in comparison with Dreamcatcher. Like, Dreamcatcher refers to this disabled friend of theirs named Duddits, who, bound this Ka-Tet of friends together. But, I don't know. Once again, so much retread, especially with these friends in Derry who are just, they're obviously a significant amount of time behind the Losers Club, but there are so many similarities. Most notably, Beaver, as much as I love him, is basically trash mouth. He is most definitely Richie in every possible capacity, and Henry is pretty much Big Bill. I mean, and then that's where the similarities kind of, disappear. And, I guess Jonesy and, I don't know. Pete is fine, Jonesy's fine, whatever. But, this is a much more dude-centric, I guess, story in comparison, because, Bevy from the Levy at least kind of weighed things out, balanced things out. But, there's with the exception of Duddit's mom, Roberta, there's like no female characters in this at all. None. So I don't know if that was deliberate by Cy King's intent or whatever, but in any event, Tabby did not allow him to title it Cancer. It ends up being called Dreamcatcher. But the book basically starts out in an interesting fashion because of the fact that it starts out first, the news. And it's basically all these different headlines from 1947 through 2000. And I think it goes to 2001, if I'm not mistaken. Nope, it's May 15, 2000, because he ended the book in May of 2000. But you've got all of these headlines, as far back as there's stuff from Oregon, there's stuff from Roswell, New Mexico, in the late 40s. And then they speed up to stuff here in the deadly desert of Arizona, because there were the Phoenix Lights in the late 90s. There was also the guy being abducted, allegedly, in the White Mountains here on the Mogollon Rim. And they made that movie Fire in the Sky about it, which is legit one of the most frightening alien films, as far as abduction at least, that I have ever seen. It messed me up as a kid when I saw Fire in the Sky, especially because of the fact that I went on the Indian reservation here, the Native American Reds, to play in Bylas, Arizona, play basketball. And I heard creepy as fuck stories from some of the much older natives who were there on the res. This old woman in particular told this weird story about how she was out hunting with her father one time back in the 60s, and she saw strange, unexplained light up near the res, and it followed them, and this weird light was following them up in the sky. And I still have nightmares anytime I think about that. I try to keep it like out of sight, out of mind, so to speak. But yeah, man. So there's all of these different headlines, everything from Strange Rain Craft Crashes in Mato Grosso, and I believe that's the one from the Brazilian Nacional from the 50s. I believe King was actually combing from actual reported UFO events as far as this goes. Stuff in New Hampshire, food poisoning epidemic in Playstyle still unexplained. Over 300 affected. Most recovering FDA officer says may have been contaminated wells. And so he basically combs through all kinds of presumed, there's stuff from the New York Times, alien abductees remain convinced, so-called gray men, so on and so forth. But yeah, so basically King sets the stage right off the bat with this like sort of newsreel sort of thing, which I guess kind of similar to Carrie in a way, because Carrie is told with so many different AP headlines and things of that nature, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, this is a book that I believe it was Matty Jorson who was talking about this the other day in the Hale group, and he was like, I couldn't even get through half of this, and that's because this is divided into 3 parts. So it starts out with first you have the preamble, which is SSDD, same shit, different day, no bounce, no play. And then it goes into part 1, which is cancer. Part 2 is the Gray Boys. And then part 3 is Quabbin, which is basically this like water reservoir in Massachusetts that, gives water to most of the state. And I believe a lot of other portions in just New England in general. But yeah, everybody, I'm going to comb through the comments here quickly before I launch into proper thoughts. But yeah, just to double down, I found significant more merit in this. I still have major problems with this book, but yeah, I appreciated it more. That is about as far as I will go. Okay, so let's see. Jens Lindgren says, hey, Fuego, finished the book last month. It was okay in the beginning, but just went down the hill. I totally agree. That Cars Energy, what the F, was that slow-paced overall? Love your content. I'm your #1 fan. Ha, that's funny. Okay, and then Daniel Corey, jumping in real quick, says, I'll say this for the film. Jason Lee was a great choice for the Beeb. Absolutely, man. I miss Jason Lee. I know he's a Scientologist, and he's got kind of weird over the years, doesn't really act anymore, but between Mallrats and Chasing Amy, Almost Famous, My Name is Earl, which is the shit. I love that show. I was very sad that, him and Jamie Presley and Crabman, I forget the name of the actor, didn't get to properly finish that off, because I love that show. Terrific comedy on NBC from a ways back at this particular point. Philip Kruger jumps on and says, I actually like Dreamcatcher. Finished it in January. Yeah, that's the thing. Art is subjective, as I constantly contend on this channel. And so for that reason, if you dug the hell out of Dreamcatcher, more power to you. If you can find enjoyment in art that other people don't like, that is legitimately something special, because you probably see something in it as far as consideration, appreciation, whatever, that others are just overlooking. And that is to double down once again, that I like this book a lot more. It's still very, very bottom king rung, like D to F in the tier list, because of the fact that it just rehashes so friggin' much. But this is leaps and bounds above Bag of Bones as far as my least favorite Sai King tale goes. So, okay, what else we got? Alberto Perez. Hello. Hola. Paso, wait. Excuse me. Okay. Corey W. says, glad I caught this. And F, yeah, Jason Lee was the perfect choice for B. Sharon Beveridge says, love Aliens, love Sai King. Did not love this, though. Yeah, I mean, I've also talked a lot of smack about Under the Dome, and I have praised the Tommy Knockers. Yeah, Sai King, when he writes alien stuff, I don't know. I Am the Doorway, I personally think is his best as far as like just alien presence goes personally, but that is just me. If you guys have not checked out I Am the Doorway, it's a night shift, and it is the shiznittle bam, snip, snap, snip. Josh Murray, yo, everybody, long days and pleasant nights, everyone. I understand the criticism this book gets, but I still love the book. There you go. There are peeps who really dig this one. It wasn't the first King book I read, but it was the first S. King book I bought. There you go. I was around 13 or 14 then. Bought it with money earned from mowing yards. There you go, man. Do it proper. Okay, Sharon also says there are others that I love and some don't. Yeah, and once again, that is the awesomeness of art in the fact that we have our own personal taste, our own flavor, baby. Corey W. says, I love it too, though. I know it's a bit of a mess. Well, the film is significantly more of a mess, as I mentioned. And yeah, man, with that cast and with Lawrence Kasdan, but that's the thing. Lawrence Kasdan, with the exception of co-writing Empire Strikes Back, I can't say that I'm too over the moon about his output aside from that in comparison. Lucas Lopez. Hi, Pasta, dude. What's going on? Tim Bray says, hey, Fuego. And B-Rad Loves America says, good point. I still like Dreamcatcher more than Doomickey. Wow, shots fired. Dreamcatcher better than Doomickey. But once again, personal taste, man. So, okay, so let's launch into the notes. I'm going to get another little sip of my caffeination session, and we will get rock-a-lockin'. So, okay, so I mentioned first the news, but let's talk about some of these quotes. So in the 3 different segments that Sai King has here, the first 2 are quotes from a poet who died at a relatively young age, if I'm not mistaken. So part 1, Cancer, basically starts out, Theodore Rothke, I believe. So it says, the shaking keeps me steady. I should know. What falls away is always and is near. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. I learn by going where I have to go. So yeah, I mean, not something that's going to set the stage in some profound fashion, but nonetheless, it just almost implies an inevitability. And I think with a segment entitled Cancer, all too often there is that inevitability of your own demise, that people who find out they have cancer stare down. And King was soul-searching about his own mortality when he was writing this, especially after the accident. So that is something very significant to keep in mind here. But yeah, so we talked about first the news and just the long documentedness of, just alien presence here. And there is something that is mentioned in the second part of this book that I found fascinating, is that all of these UFO stuff that was significantly documented, Kurtz, or one of the military people, I believe it's Kurtz if I'm not mistaken, and shout out to all Heart of Darkness, Joseph Conrad, and more people know Apocalypse Now, but I personally prefer the Conrad novella. That's just me. But so Kurtz says at one particular point later in the book, he's like, yeah, the aliens started showing up after we created the A-bomb. And so it's like that amount of energy expulsion, like, caught their attention, so to speak. And so that's why they started poking around. But I would imagine if there is, in fact, life on other worlds, I'm more of a person that, yes, in like distant galaxies and stuff, there is most definitely got to be intelligent life. But I'm actually more of a subscriber, and not just because of the fact that I'm a constant reader, but I kind of think the likelihood of like creatures coming from alternate dimensions is a little bit higher of a likelihood, like a parallel universe, so to speak, situation. And the reason they pop up in New Mexico so goddamn often, or, Area 51 in Nevada or whatever, is because of the fact that there has to be a thinny there. There has to be like a thin overlapping area of reality. And so if they keep just showing up there or being reported over and over and over, and I guarantee some of those reports are fakes, but nonetheless, this, for whatever reason, the Southwest, whether Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, I mean, I don't know, there's got to be a thinny somewhere in this vicinity. But so yeah, even before we get to Cancer, you've got SSDV, No Bounce, No Play, as I say, and that's where we get introduced to our 4 main peeps. So you've got Beaver, who we meet in 1988, and he's kind of, he's recently divorced. He's got a joint in his pocket, and he's playing cards to see who picks up the rounds of beers at the bar in Maine, and he's just not doing so good. He's in a bad place. And then 5 years later, we meet Pete, and Pete is the one who, like, they all have a bit of the line, as they call it, but it's really like the touch, the shine, so to speak, that they got from their dude Duds. And this is a spoiler review, just to keep everybody properly informed. But yeah, so Pete has this knack for finding things. And so he's a car salesman when we meet him in 1993. And this woman has lost her keys. She comes into the dealership, and Pete starts basically kind of flirting, and he takes it upon himself to help her find her keys. So he goes back to this like convenience store where she last had them, and he helps her find them. But they're like in a puddle near her car because she just very carelessly lost them. And as opposed to swooning over this second sight, this intuition, so to speak, yeah, she's creeped the fuck out, and she's just like, no, I have no interest in going to eat some clams with you, man, because you are a friggin' weirdo. So that's our introduction to Pete. And I will say right off the bat that I'm bummed out that Beaver and Pete just meet the demises that they do, both in a relatively gruesome fashion, because Jonesy and Henry are both fine. But Pete and Beaver are my 2 favorites of this particular Ka-Tet, this Losers Club 2.0, basically. And yeah, the fact that both of those guys, they bite the dust, it just bums me up, because they're my 2 favorite characters of this quartet that eventually becomes 5 with duds and stuff, and 6 at one point if you include Josie, I believe was the name of the girl that they rescue later on. But so then we speed forward 5 more years and we meet Henry, and Henry is he's a shrink, and he's got this grotesquely obese guy who comes and sees him and lies down on the couch and just basically talks about his escapades of consumption. And King has really made it plain and clear that he likes to eat. I mean, he shouts out the friggin' McDonald's Big Macs and Whoppers and stuff in so many of his goddamn books. I'm thinking of Thinner and just the way King was a little heftier back then because of all the drinking. And you kind of think the drinking and the cocaine would balance itself out a little bit with him, but not when you're chowing to that degree. But King has very fondly described food. And this guy who's been seeing Henry for a while as he's waiting for his estate to pan out and stuff, talking about, eating an entire package of Eggo waffles and, hey, you gotta microwave them because, when they're all soft and supple and just, I don't know. Some people, like my father is straight edge, for instance, and he talks about food like it's sex. I mean, hey, more power to you if you can find your fulfillment in that regard. But so that's basically Henry's dig. And he is still getting, because him and Jonesy have the closest connection. They have the most line, I guess you would say, in comparison with, Beeve and Pete specifically. But Henry and Jonesy are the more kind of straight-laced and, just like calm and composed of this quartet. And they're the ones who are thinking about how they need to go back to Derry and they need to see their buddy Duddits, who was the aforementioned disabled kid who kind of, when they save him, imbues a power upon them, so to speak. Then we jump forward 3 years to 2001, and that's when we meet Jonesy. And Jonesy is basically the Sai King stand-in this regard because of the fact that Jonesy gets hit by a car in this. Like he goes from talking to this 19-year-old kid he's an instructor at this university, and he goes from basically letting this kid off the hook to thinking about duds and then walking into traffic and getting run over by this guy with early onset Alzheimer's. And so Jonesy is most def the King stand-in as far as injury goes, as far as dealing with pain, depression, all these different mental things that come with that sort of accident. And that's basically our 4 main peeps. And there is some, as I mentioned, there is cynicism, and I really trace it back to the fact that King was in such significant pain when he wrote this book. And I do feel like that played a heavy hand in the writing. But I always like to read a few passages, and this is a particular favorite, and ironically, it's on page 19. So basically, Pete, along with Beaver being my personal favorite characters, Pete probably my fave. As much as I love Jason Lee in that movie, I feel like, Beav, once again, stand in for Trashmouth. Pete is a little bit different. Pete did not immediately seem like a member of the Losers Club the way Henry and Beaver did. And Pete basically always dreamed of being an astronaut, and unfortunately, that dream panned out, and he's freaking selling cars and, making the rounds in the bars, trying to, get a piece of ace. And so this is where it gets just relatively depressing, I must say. And so here we go. Dreams age faster than dreamers. That is a fact of life Pete has discovered as the years pass. Yet the last ones often die surprisingly hard, screaming in low, miserable voices at the back of the brain. That's some very just dark, depressing stuff. And especially for somebody like King, who lived his dream of being a successful writer and adaptation. But I think success does, as so many artists have made plain and clear over the years, success does not indicate happiness a lot of the time. And especially for those who are very combative creatives, I feel like there is just a deep inherent self-doubt, perhaps, because I think creatives are often arrogant, or they are just constantly second-guessing themselves, overly analytical. Sometimes both, but I do feel like it's a one or the other. It's like, there is a lot of self-doubt, or there is just overconfidence, one of the two, as far as people who are just inherently prolifically creative. And so that is something to keep in mind. But we don't know the days that will change our lives, probably just as well. And that comes from Jonesy as he's thinking about the accident and the fact that he had no idea he was going to walk out into the street and get run over and nearly die. just like Sai King. So that is the stand-in. And just with going with those few thoughts from the preamble of SSDD, let's see what everybody has to say. So let's go back to the live chatting news. Okay. Okay, Lucas says, I'm now reading it. It's Stephen King's full movie, part 1, 1990. Okay. I'm coming for you, Barbara. Okay. Corey W. says, these flashbacks in this book did not work anywhere near as well as they did in something like it. And that's, once again, there are so many similarities between this and it. The fact that it's in Derry, the fact that there's this young group of friends, the fact that there are so many flashbacks. That's why I've been so critical of this book over the years, because of the fact that it's just so much rehash, so much retread. And I'm like, okay, I would prefer to read it again. You know, I would prefer to read the Tommyknockers again, which is an unpopular opinion. But nonetheless, that's how I personally feel. Okay. Lucas also says, I just watched Thinner. Not a huge fan of it. I really appreciate that Thinner film, that Tom Holland. Not the Tom Holland that I saw in that shitty Chaos Walking movie last night. Daisy Ridley and him were in this sci-fi film that Doug Liman had sitting on the shelf for many years. I went out to a theater last night. I went out to the IMAX and I watched that, and boy, was that film disappointing. All right, Jacob says, almost missed this one. Evening Fuego. I actually enjoyed this one a lot. Did you enjoy more this time? Jacob, my dude, I actually did. I appreciated this book significantly more, and now it is at least leaps and bounds above Bag of Bones as far as a King book that I have a lot of criticism for, but still found aspects that I appreciated. I think that this book really, as I've said before, loses significant steam in the middle portion. Like, basically, once we start getting acquainted with the military peeps, that's when this book really just kind of goes off the rails for me personally. So, okay, Levis, Jika? The way King thought to use the alien beings as parasitic creatures is so biologically real. Lucas says, I'm sorry, I just wanted to laugh. Mikey, what is good, my dude? Hope you are recovering proper, man. I saw that you had a bout with the Rona, and hope that your body is recovering properly and you are getting close to the badassness. We have been so behind on the Patreon stuff, Mikey, that I just finally watched Gamera, and we're finally going to be putting that review up here shortly. So the 90s Gamera is pretty damn good, I got to say. I think I even liked it better than Godzilla. Sharon also says, I always like Tommyknockers. Yeah, Garth is my dude, man. He's another one of those Larry Underwood type characters that is like, and very similar to Pete in this too, which is probably why I identify with him so much as well. He is a very, what's the word that I'm looking for? He is just a very fragile and, character who just, he's flawed for sure. He means well and he has a good heart, but he obviously has personal demons and, the bottle and the damage done, something that I have said various times. Zach King, another peep from the Hail to Stephen King Ka-Tet showing up. Says, hey, Fuego, literally just woke up and saw that you're live. Yeah, man, this is significantly earlier than I typically go live. I'm sure it works out better for the overseas audiences like my buddies Jacob and Mikey. But, yeah, man, that's why I'm sitting here sipping the coffee in Z Cafe. Trying to get adequately caffeinated before my band comes over for smashing some skins. But, okay, Austin Banal, another one. Started way early. I'm still at work. Sorry, man. Yeah, I gave a heads up late last night because of the fact that it's a very busy Saturday here in the States for me. But, yeah, man. Okay, Mikey says, nice. Yeah, I'm doing hella better now. Can't wait for the reviews. Right on, man. Yeah, I actually had to go to Flixflame to find that I think it was a Korean movie called The Cat that you requested like way back in the day. And we're finally getting to that shizzle. But, okay, so now that we have caught up proper on the comments, let's get to it. So part 1, cancer. So every November, this Ka-Tet of Friends consistently for over 2 decades has been going and having these hunting trips at the Hole in the Wall, which it was basically Beaver, the trash mouth Richie stand-in. They've been going since way back when his father was still alive. And the group has reconvened, and it's only a matter of months after, what's his face, Jonesy has been run over and, stared the Grim Reaper right in the eyes. So that was definitely a bit of an issue. But so despite that injury, the group has still reconvened, and that is where the shit hits the fan, because half of the group has gone to get supplies, and the other half is back there. But they basically realize very quickly that something relatively nasty is amiss. So Henry and Peter, when they're out getting supplies, they come across this woman who is like frozen out in the middle of nowhere, and that is the visage that on all of the movie posters, I believe, the woman with the parka, and she's just like chilling out in the snow. So Henry and Pete meet this woman who is very obviously delirious and afflicted, and then Beaver and Jonesy, back at the hole in the wall, they come across this guy named McCarthy. And so both of them are just like not acting like supremely coherent or with it or whatever. And this is where we get our introduction to the fact that a alien presence, or at least an otherworldly presence, our main characters don't really know too much at that particular point. But yeah, they realize very quickly what the hell is going on, and that it is most definitely something dire. And shit weasels. I mean, I don't know. It's such a it's interesting, as our commenter said, Levis. Sorry, I'm trying to double check the comments. The way they approached it as a parasitic sort of thing, I actually appreciated the fact that when we finally get our answers as to what has specifically transpired, and once we get to the second part, the Gray Boys, an alien ship has basically crash landed. And there are a bunch of its gray men, that have brought a parasitic presence along with them. And it's like this red gold, like mold, like moss sort of thing. And it's kind of amusing in the fact that the military guys that come on the scene to quarantine the area, they start calling it Ripley, after, which is even funnier, the fact that they call this parasitic presence Ripley. And then, one of our main characters' names is Jonesy. I have made it no secret that the second Aliens film is probably my favorite movie of all time. It's either that or Clerks. They are such drastically different sorts of films, and they're both one syllable. How about that? And they're both plurals too, which is funny. But yeah, man, the second Aliens film is absolutely incredible, and there's lots of nods to that. Sai King mentions everything within the text here, from the Starship Troopers to Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and so. But so this. Whatever sort of, it's not intentional biological warfare, or so the Gray Boys are saying, but that is what has infected this woman, and that is what has infected McCarthy. So our group is splintered at this particular point, and we also have to take into contention the fact that Henry, who is basically our Big Bill stand-in, he is grappling with suicidal thoughts. So he's thinking about hello darkness, my old friend, and he had basically been contemplating all of the different ways that he could just end it. And so that is something that is significantly plaguing him. However, those thoughts are dashed away when, because most people who want to commit suicide, who want to end their lives, there is a selfishness about doing it on your own terms. So if you are having those thoughts and then you find yourself in this like ridiculously insane sort of situation, that is probably going to call attention away from your big, profound final statement. I feel like that sort of selfishness inherently plays in, so that is something to keep in mind. But so Rick McCarthy, that just the way King describes, King loves his. Stephen King is very much like my father in a lot of ways, in the fact that Sai King loves his toilet humor, man, and this book really doubles down on that. The burping and the farting, the belching and the flatulence that we get from these peeps who have these parasites within them. They've got like their guts all swollen and shit, and they're, basically burping and belching, and it's like a cross somewhere between like ether and bananas, I think is what it's described as countless times. But so that is the deal with both McCarthy and this woman that Henry and Pete have found. And so, yeah, man, it just gets pretty dire from there. There is a military presence that Beaver discovers very quickly, because there's helicopters flying around. I also see the mass exodus of all of these animals. Anytime you see a mass exodus of animals in a rural area, out in the woods or the wilderness or whatever, that is a heavy indicator that some serious shizzle is hitting the fan. And so when they see the deer and the bears and, all of this wildlife getting the fog out, that's a big indicator. And then Henry, as I mentioned already, he's got his Hemingway solution, and the hello darkness, my old friend, the suicidal aspect. And it's also amusing. Jonesy, as I said, is the King stand-in in this. Jonesy is described by Henry as being all about detective novels and horror stories. That's what floats his boat. That's what Henry says at one particular point. And yeah, so besides the accident, also the affinity for specific types of creativity is most definitely something that Jonesy is a stand-in for. So I already mentioned the animal exodus, lights in the sky, strange women, weird-ass delirious man in McCarthy. And so they try to feed McCarthy back in Hole in the Wall, but it's not really going so well. And they basically lay him down to sleep, but in a close proximity to Zibanyo. And that's another thing, man. Like, Beaver is so much of a stand-in for Richie that he even says "Senor" at one particular point. So, I mean, we know King goes back to the well. You know, he writes about writers and teachers all too often, but so many similarities, man. But yeah, so basically Henry leaves Pete with this woman that they found out in the snow, and Henry's trying to get back to the Hole in the Wall, while at the same time Beaver and Jonesy are dealing with the fart machine, farting burping machine, who ends up going into the banyo. And yeah, if you're familiar with the Tremors franchise, they call them ass blasters. Well, that's basically what kind of happens to this McCarthy guy. And our first shit weasel appearance transpires there. And it's described as like an eel, with like these big black eyes, but also razor sharp teeth like a shark. And quickly we meet the demise of one of my personal favorite characters. Beaver bites the dust just like Pete bites the dust. So like both of those guys with their separate encounters with this strange woman and with this strange man who are both from the same hunting party, they both look like, I don't know, Beaver, he's sitting on the toilet when the shit weasel is in there. And for whatever reason, those toothpicks that his friends and his mother as well joked would be the death of him, well, it becomes the death of him because for whatever reason, he's just so antsy. He tries to go get one of those. The shit weasel comes out and it ends up like chewing on him and killing him. And it's just really, really sad. Unfortunately, it's a much more prolonged sort of situation with Pete in the fact that he has an encounter with one and he's like bitten in like the like little inseam of his hand and stuff. And as you're bit by these things, there's two different levels of the Ripley, as Henry figures out later on in the book. So there's primary and there's secondary. Primary is where it's a done deal. You are not going to survive it. However, secondary is where, I mean, if you have like an adequate immune system or maybe perhaps some sort of immunity, you could probably get past the Ripley, get past this weird parasitic presence that is trying to go through you, and you won't end up with a shit weasel growing in your abdomen. So, but yeah, man, just the way Pete's demise, the fact that the red gold is spreading through him and he can feel it happening, and like his skull ends up cracking and stuff like. And so, pretty early in the book, my two favorite characters, Dunzo, right off the bat. So that's a little bit of a disappointment. Okay, as we jump to so back to the fact that it jumps back to the Derry and them as kids all too often. So the structuring is right within the same sort of approach as it, man. And that's. As I've said, rehash for better or for worse, like, I don't know. But we do have this flashback where they first meet their buddy. Their buddy Duddits, their buddy Duds. And the fact that he is the one who imbues them with this line, this second sight, this power, so to speak. And basically Duds is being picked on by these older kids. And as they first meet him, like, first, they find his Scooby-Doo lunchbox, and they find his Derry Tigers uniform, number 19, obviously. And so they basically ward off these villainous asshole kids, and they save this dude. And so lots of similarities here, with it, obviously. And they calm him down by Sweet Little Bee singing to him, which is really cute. It's like Baby Bunting or something like that. But he has this really sweet song that he sings to him, calms him down, and then they go from a quartet of 4. They are 5. They are quintups, man. And so that is basically their Ka-Tet grows at that particular point. And so their friendship with Duds is one that we flash back to a number of times. We see flashbacks of everything from them graduating to them saving this girl who has a crush on Duds. I mean, there's a lot going on. But so Henry, as he's trying to make his way back to the Hole in the Wall to get help and everything, Pete is left with that strange woman, and I already mentioned what goes down with her. There's a movie in the Through Woods. There's a movie in the cloud, a scary one, the kind Jonesy likes. That was something that Henry muses at one particular point that I really dug. Beeve guarding the beast in the bowl. The fact that King describes the beast in the bowl. Once again, back to that toilet humor, man. The shit weasel, as I mentioned. And so Jonesy, for anybody who has seen the movie or has read the book, you know that Jonesy basically, so there's Mr. Gray, this alien that shows up, and its head like explodes. And so all of those like parasitic particles, they go into Jonesy, and he is basically taken over. Like, we're talking Invasion of the Body Snatchers sort of shit here. And they actually talk smack about the Donald Sutherland remake from the 70s, which I found kind of funny, because that's my personal favorite. I mean, I don't know, remakes, people debate them constantly. But so yes, Jonesy is suddenly at the mercy, and he is basically a passenger in his own mind. And it leads to some interesting writing, I think, in the fact that this presence can't completely take him over, presumably because of that power that Duddits imbued within them. But yeah, at the end of the day, those scenes don't work for me, and they really, really don't work in the movie. But once again, I'm not here to talk about the movie. And we have our first introduction at the end of part 1 to Abraham Kurtz. Kurtz not being his real name, Kurtz being, you know, the main dude from Heart of Darkness and from Apocalypse Now, the Francis Ford Coppola film. But yeah, he's on TV, and he is denying like a motherfucker. And I don't know. This is where we segue into the Gray Boys Part 2, and just this, I don't like the military stuff very much in this book, man. And it reminds me very much of what King would do in 2009 with Under the Dome, and the fact that Henry is eventually taken captive, and yet there is this guy, Owen Underhill, I believe is his name, and he basically becomes kind of like a traitor to the insane cartoonishness that is Kurtz. So if we just had alien villains, that would have been one thing. But for whatever reason, King decided to craft this dichotomy of having a over-the-top, ridiculously cartoonish villain in Kurtz. So you've got Mr. Gray, who was taking over Jonesy's body. That is our main villain, and he has something much grander in scale that he is trying to accomplish, as far as just like destruction of an entire region of the United States, if not more. And then you've got Kurtz, who, in some ways, I respect and understand what Kurtz was trying to do. He was trying to squash a potential pandemic, which is definitely one of the things I found interesting about this book in the last year that we have lived, because it's been like a friggin' year now, man. The fact that you've got military people going around with masks on, the fact that they're trying to just keep this, keep this quarantine, keep this area just sectioned off and not spreading. And there's this moral dilemma that is placed in the middle to the back third of the book about the fact that all of these infected people should not be massacred; they should be spared. But in some ways, I kind of understand the whole the needs of the many far outweigh the needs of the few sort of situation. And unfortunately, if you have a bunch of people who are infected with a parasite that could potentially spread it to a much larger contingent of people, it's a shitty situation, but you kind of know what has to transpire. Maybe not massacre them, and that's where King, he's like, oh, well, they got presumptuous. They didn't understand the fact that some people could be immune, that some people, just like with the Rona 19, could get over it and recover. And just the fact that they just jump to conclusions, that's something that King with his just constant criticism of government and military and stuff like that, people probably have mixed feelings about that, especially if you serve in branches and stuff like that. But nonetheless, man, it's interesting the way King decided to villainize, because Mr. Gray is the totally understandable villain, and then you've got the more gray area, villain that is Kurtz and everything. And then he's got his little lackeys like Perlmutter and stuff. And boy, Perlmutter does not have he's got a pretty nasty demise in the third act of this particular book. But so Kurtz and his military contingent, they have taken it upon themselves not only to quarantine and hold in captivity all these infected people in the region, but they also are going to go and shoot down all them gray boys that are basically standing around, twiddling their goddamn thumbs around their crashed aircraft. And so they're basically broadcasting in various famous voices from the alien contingent, and they're talking in everything from the voice of Bill Clinton to Barbara Streisand, and what they are saying over and over is 4 things. They're saying, don't hurt us, we're helpless, no infection here, we're dying. And that's because they're not built for, surviving in this particular environment, and that definitely obviously derived some inspiration from War of the Worlds. Remember, what kills the alien contingent in that is the fact that they weren't built for the parasitic presences of Earth, and so, yeah, that's what ends up winning at the end of the day. But they're obviously lying with this broadcast because they did bring something infectious with them, whether they're particularly cognizant of it or not, which an elevated intelligence going across, light years of space and stuff, you would think that they're probably aware. And there is also this presence of telepathy, because the aliens communicate with said capacity. And so all of the humans within the proximity of this crashed aircraft, they're also reading each other's thoughts. And it's especially amplified with our Ka-Tet, or our surviving Ka-Tet, specifically Henry, who is our Big Bill stand-in, as I mentioned. And yeah, man, it's interesting stuff. I like those ideas of the infection and of the shared telepathy and reading each other's thoughts. I like those portions, but it's really just going to mow down all the aliens to sympathy of the devil. And I don't know. There's just, I do like where Henry discovers the eggs, the shit weasel eggs, and he's talking about, I am the Eggman, cuckoo-ca-choo, getting all Beatlesy with that shizzle, even if I prefer the Stones to the Beats. Nonetheless, like there are a lot of enjoyable aspects to this story, but back to the fact that Jonesy in the hospital of his mind, and then also going to the weird office and stuff that he does over the course of time, he does have some interesting little jokes that he's thinking about as he's trapped in his head and a passenger in his own body, basically, because Mr. Gray's taken it over. How do porcupines fuck? Very carefully. And this one is probably not in best taste, but hey, Stephen King drops N-bombs like an asshole all the goddamn time, so I don't friggin' know. He even calls them space you-know-whats, and I'm just like, King, really got to do that, man? Like, seriously? Dude, we're so far past this. But what do you call a Jamaican proctologist? A Pokemon. Yeah, that's just silly in my estimation. But so in any event, the title of this book, as I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, The Dreamcatcher, is basically... It's a very ambiguous title, and I know King tries to give some explanation about it in the fact that he's like, yeah, the Dreamcatcher, Duddits is their Dreamcatcher, all of those, almost like the intricacies of a spider web, it's what bound them together, their friendship with this disabled kid who obviously was imbued with powers beyond regular people, passed it along to them after they saved him from those bullies and stuff. But I just, the ambiguity of this particular title, I've just really, I've never been too much about it, but hey, what the hell are you gonna do? So we know obviously that Jonesy is just kind of keeping Mr. Gray at bay, so to speak, as he is going, he's basically, Mr. Gray has this mission to try to get to this big water supply and basically contaminate all of it, infect a large contingent of New England, that particular area of the country. Especially, it's down to just him, because Kurtz and his henchmen, they mow down all of those aliens from, that crashed spacecraft. And so it just boils down to, Mr. Gray, and was that the mission, or was that his own personal motif and aspiration? It's never really made particularly clear. But nonetheless, as I mentioned, Kurtz is a lame, cartoony villain that I just do not particularly care for very much. It was very surreal, the whole stopping the pandemic and killing the infected and so on and so forth. But he does have an interesting thing that Kurtz muses at one particular point, and that's where I don't think he is just villainous black, so to speak. Like they say, there's black and white, so to speak. No, it's all shades of gray in a lot of ways. And Kurtz is that shade of gray in the fact that he does muse that, because just like with the Rona 19, with the vid, they're like, yes, the cold is going to kill it, and that is where these parasites, whether the shit weasels or the red gold moss, basically the weird growths and stuff like that, the Ripley as they call it, it was very fortuitous that that they happened to crash in November when they did, when it is snow covered and it is significantly cold. And Kurtz muses at one particular point, luck or God, take your choice. And I think that's a very interesting observation because, once again, extremely fortunate that this outbreak transpired when it did because they were able to contain it so much easier based on the weather. So I found that particularly interesting on the timing of this accidental invasion. And then I've made mention of Jonesy and his mental walls versus Mr. Gray. The fact that so there is the allegorical metaphor, manifestation, whatever, of Jonesy and all of his memories within his head because he's that passenger in his own mind and his own body, as I specified. And because he doesn't want Mr. Gray to have additional access to that information, he's hiding. He's like dollying around these big boxes of memories. And so he has both memories of Derry and memories of Duddits, because Duddits is the one who is basically, if not for the power that Duddits passed along, Jonesy presumably would have been completely taken over by Mr. Gray. There would have been no ifs, ands, or buts about that shizzle. And so, yeah, that's something to keep in mind. But also the fact that Derry specifically is where Mr. Gray, by way of Jonesy's body, is trying to get so he can contaminate this big water supply. And once we do get to Derry official, at least in 2001, when this is taking place, or 2000, I should specify, book released in 2001, book taking place in 2000. Yeah, we do get our references, finally, and I will mention those here briefly. There's mention of the 85 storm that destroyed a good portion of the town. We get a Losers Club nod. We get a Pennywise reference, so we're going to be getting to those here as we're rounding out the third and final act of this. But they also have, once again, flashbacks throughout this entire damn thing, man. And so there's a brutal car accident that transpires on their first camping trip to Hole in the Wall that our Ka-Tet peeps have. And one of the bullies who was, just savaging duds when they first meet him, motherfucker gets his head sliced off in this accident. And they find this little moccasin and so on and so forth. So that's obviously a traumatic memory that Henry and Jonesy, I believe, both go back to. But so the captured Henry, back to when we've got Jonesy taken over, trying to get down to Derry, contaminate water supply, and at the same time, Henry has been taken into captivity. He is infected with a little bit of the red gold Ripley, but it's presumably secondary, not primary. Primary is where you've got a shit weasel growing in you. Secondary is where your immune system could potentially fight it off. And he strikes up this friendship very similar to just talking with the military on the other side of the quarantine zone under the dome. But yeah, so Henry basically, he strikes up this kind of kinship with Owen Underhill. Underhill is the guy who is going to betray Kurtz. And so they basically formulate this plan together. And Henry basically, because of all that telepathy, that shared kind of mindset, he decides to push the 300 plus people that are being held in this barn, quarantined, and are all going to be killed at one particular point. He pushes all of them to smash down the doors and, basically escape. They're trampling each other. There's military that are getting, scared and either being killed by the mob or killing themselves. It's pretty nuts. But so then at the same particular point, I'm going to jump to page 386. And as Jonesy is finally getting to Derry, this is where we have our most direct connection possible. So as Jonesy gets there, and also Jonesy is remembering the fact that they were in college when the 85 storm transpired, and they also make mention of the fact that kids disappear all the time in Derry. So there's lots of little Easter eggs in that regard. Further Easter eggs that we get is there's reference to playing cards, Strong and Free, a tall cowboy. There's a mention of Jerusalem's lot. So there's a significant portion of stuff going on here. But so Jonesy is planning to contaminate this area that was destroyed with the storm, or at least Mr. Gray by way of Jonesy. And so they come to this statue, and this is what we got at the end of 385. The pedestal was drifted to most of its height in snow, but the top of the plaque screwed to the front was visible. Mr. Gray fell to Jonesy's knees, scraped snow away, and read this. To those lost in the storm, May 31st, 1985, and to the children, all the children, love from Bill, Ben, Bev, Eddie, Richie, Stan, Mike, the Losers Club. But then this is where it's relatively interesting. Spray painted across it in jagged red letters, also perfectly visible in the truck's headlights, was this further message. Pennywise lives. So that's where a lot of people, they're like, okay, 27 years later, I mean, that would have obviously been 2012, right? So obviously, Stephen King did not write a sequel to it, but the fact that he has constantly teased, like even in the Tommyknockers, I believe, he talked about laughing in the drains and stuff like that. So Sai King, he makes mention quite a bit that maybe the Losers Club did not, in fact, vanquish this evil presence that they, fought so hard to combat. But yeah, also back to, as we segue into the third and final act of this and wrap things up, the title of Cancer makes even more sense because of the fact that their buddy Duds, he's all grown up now, and they have this like inherent sort of like guilt in the fact that they all left and abandoned him. They're in various areas of like New England and stuff like that, and as they grew up, they turned their back on their buddy that they fought so hard to save at one particular point. He's dying of cancer. And so whether talking about the cancerousness of the Ripley, the parasite, if people get infected with it and get a shit weasel, it's going to ass blast out or whatever, or if it's just, the fact that their buddy Duds, despite all of his power, is still at the mercy of just infection beyond his control. That's something to keep in mind. And but Duds, he basically, as Henry and Underhill escape and are trying to get to him, Duds knows that both Pete and Beef have passed, and so that's particularly sad. But yes, jump into part 3. Quabbin, whatever the hell it is. Basically, that is a water reservoir. And I was Googling this last night just out of personal curiosity because I was just like, oh, that term is obviously referring to something specific. But so the Quabbin Reservoir is the largest inland body of water in Massachusetts. Was built between 1930 and 1939 today, along with the Wachusett Reservoir. It is the primary water supply for Boston, some 65 miles. So basically, after Mr. Gray, by way of Jonesy, realizes that he can't contaminate in Derry the way that he had hoped to, that's where he makes his way to Quabbin. And so it turns into like the back third of this, like the third act is essentially a chase. And that's where we've got the chase begins, the chase continues, and the chase ends. And you've got Henry and Underhill, who are after Jonesy, and then behind Henry and Owen is Kurtz and Perlmutter and Freddie, I think is the name of the other guy. So there's this small surviving contingent of military madness with Kurtz and his guys, and then they are on the tail of Henry and Owen, who are trying to catch up with this possessed Jonesy to stop him from, doing this dastardly deed. By this particular point, Jonesy, by way of Mr. Gray, has this diseased dog that he's going to throw into this Quabbin, and it's going to pollute, this entirely nastily large reservoir of water. And they tell this really weird story about this Russian woman who committed suicide by basically stripping off all of her clothes and then jumping into this water area, and how, just the surging like rapids or whatever was just so powerful that she would have been like torn to shreds, and then people would be drinking her in their water. And there's a joke at one particular point where the guy's like, nah, man, that's why I just drink beer. I don't trust that water or some shit like that. So that's kind of funny. But yeah, as I mentioned, the three-way chase in the book's finale. It's also very fascinating that this is a pre-9/11, sort of narrative, because King wrote it shortly before. But yes, Kurt meets a relatively nasty demise, killed by one of his own. And so that's kind of interesting. But yeah, and eventually, as you would presume, Henry catches up to said possessed Jonesy along with Underhill. And then we get to this epilogue, which is Norman McLean, universe is a bitch. And so, yeah, essentially everything just kind of turns out okay. Henry doesn't end up killing himself. Jonesy ends up surviving this possession, so to speak, through the power of Duds, who, dropping my pen here, who unfortunately Duds does not make it. Duds, through just the expulsion of his power, they end up vanquishing Mr. Gray and that evil alien presence. But it just, as I've said, this book is just so many ideas and themes that we've seen before in the work of Sai King that I just cannot say that I appreciated it significantly more than I did in previous readings, because I've read it 2 previous times, if I recall correctly. But so yeah, guys, I'm gonna jump to the live chat just to see what everybody has said, as I just ranted and railed for the last significant bit of time. Let's see what everybody's saying. Okay, so my dude Jacob says, I wonder if King ever had any disabled friends, or if he spent a lot of time with disabled people. He always writes them so wonderfully and with so much respect. Duddits is the man. Yeah, I completely concur with that, Jacob, in the fact that, like, it in no way feels exploitative, I guess, is the best way I could describe it, whether it's, Blaze, or whether it's this book, or, whatever. King writes the handicapped with respect and with dignity, which, is more than I could say for that CM music movie. So, Lucas Lopez says, I got to get Tommy Knockers. Sorry if I spell it wrong. Yeah, I really appreciate Tommy Knockers. Similar to this book, I feel like King's editor should have clamped down a little bit, because if this book was significantly shorter, just like with the Tommy Knockers, get a proper editor in there, and I feel like it would be a significantly more enjoyable experience, because there's a lot of good ideas in the Tommy Knockers, similar to here. My dude Mikey says, shit weasels. I always thought this book was a wannabe follow-up to it, but instead of one cosmic being, King went for a full-on invasion. You are most deaf, spot on, Mikey. That's exactly how I feel about this one. Daniel Corey says, I love the concept of the alien exploding into spores that others breathe in. Always thought that was a genius idea. Yeah, most def, man. And once again, it's Invasion of the Body Snatchers-y sort of shit, and King wears those influences on his sleeve, which I totally appreciate. Okay, what else we got? Austin says, I'll watch later. I'm really bummed I can't participate. See you guys next month. Right on, Austin. Thanks for jumping in if you are, in fact, still here. Corey W. says, the early portions of this novel are what I love so much. The pacing is so good, and it's just so entertaining. Yeah, the first act, part 1, Cancer, is really, really good. But as I mentioned, this is one that loses steam in the second act. Like, once the military gets involved, that's where this book just kind of loses me, unfortunately. Philip Kruger says, it was a bit weird that he acts to of 4 main characters so quickly. I thought the same thing. And you have to basically get further acquainted with Pete, who was 1 year younger than the rest of the Ka-Tet, and Beaver over the course of the flashbacks, as opposed to, and it's even like all of them are troubled when they're meeting for this particular hunting trip. Like, Peter is like borderline alcoholic, dissatisfied, trying to make it to 5 o'clock. Beaver is presumably still upset from, divorce and all this other stuff. Oh, excuse me. No, nothing serious, guys. Yeah, and then Henry is borderline suicidal. Jonesy just has this horrible accident. So none of them are in particularly good spots. Now, do you prefer the title of Dreamcatcher over Cancer? Zach, I actually don't. I feel like Cancer, it relates much more to the storytelling in comparison with Dreamcatcher. And I feel like just the title and trying to tie in the title with the narrative of Duds being the one that bound them together, he was their Dreamcatcher. It feels more like an afterthought to me personally. But once again, just my 2 cents of nonsense. Shout out, Lindsay. Dale Strunk jumping in. He says, hey guys, what is up, Dale? Followed you on Twitters the other day, man. And thanks for all of the support of Show Business. I believe we will be back on Monday evening for Show Business on the Willis Radio YouTube channel. Daniel further says, I always found the scene where infected Jonesy eats all the raw bacon to be funny. Yeah, Daniel, when he's like, when he makes those weird, he's like stealing bacon and he's making like the weird mayo bacon sandwiches. That is one of the things that I did find like darkly humorous, is the fact that Mr. Gray, through the inhabitation of Jonesy's body, he becomes more human through just, the act of consumption, like where he eats that whole, the cake pans, and where he eats all the bacon and then orders another round of everything. And then, his stomach's upset and all that. I mean, and the fact that he is just inherently hungry when he steals the vehicle and he's eating all the barbecue chips and stuff. Like there's a lot of funny aspects to this story, albeit of the darkly comedic. Yeah, I've got it makes me want to fry up some eggs and bacon, but I've got to do some rocking here briefly. Zach King says, I guess you answered my question. Haha. Yes, of course I did, man. I try to keep this as collaborative as possible with all of you. We have surpassed the hour mark, so that's typically, and I can hear my bandmates in the backyard. So I'm going to have to wrap it up here shortly. But Daniel also says, I'm from Massachusetts. The state actually forced 4 entire towns to abandon their homes and move out so they could build a reservoir. So there are entire towns underwater there. Holy shit, man. That's pretty nuts. Yeah, I'm not sure what part of Massachusetts you're in, Daniel, but my aunt and my cousin Catherine, they're both in Cambridge, which I know is like right outside of Boston, if I'm not mistaken. And they're always trying to get me to come and visit, man. But I think when I finally make my Sai King pilgrimage, which is, I'm hoping that as people are getting vaccinated and the world is slowly starting to get back to normal, maybe in the next year I can finally make that journey and see the King House and go on that silly tour and everything. Joseph Falcon says, cheers, Fuego. Right on, dude. I appreciate you. Daniel also says they basically flooded an entire valley, homes, churches, everything. Double down. Holy shit. That is just nuts, man. I mean, break eggs to make an omelet. Like, damn, that's crazy. Okay, Zach King says, has the book gone up in ranking after this reading? It has. I think in the tier list, I ranked it as an F. Now I would probably go like C-, D+, in all honesty. I appreciated more about it this time because even if it is rehash, even if it is retread, and it's some of my criticism for the Institute, it's some of my criticism for a lot of these stories King has written, but that's the thing, like King writes camaraderie amongst kids, and since I'm male, since I'm a dude, just the friendship of young boys, young men, basically. He writes it very convincingly, very lovingly, very respectfully, and just endearingly, man. And that's one thing that, like, even if there's so much rehash retread in this, I appreciate the friendship of these 5 friends, if you include Duds. So, but yet there is just still so much from this that I find uninspired. And King said that when he wrote this, he was hopped the fuck up on oxys. So it makes me wonder if he was almost like kind of going through the motions to a degree. You write what you know and all that different stuff, but there is a lot of personhood and just personal reflection within this book. And just to double down or triple down at this particular point, I believe there is a cynicism and a just very rampant negativity in a lot of the storytelling, even if the ending of this book is pretty cheery for the most part, despite the loss of, 3 of your friends. Like 3 of the 5 friends die in this, 2 of them by horribly nasty means, shit weasels, for God's sake. So I don't know. The book has gone up in my ranking. So yeah, after talking so much smack about Dreamcatcher and Bag of Bones in the last year, I have reread both of those for the first time in a long time. And I will just say once again that I think Bag of Bones sucks. And Dreamcatcher is significantly better than Bag of Bones, at least. I will give it that. And yeah, I wish King would write science fiction more so, because whether it's The Jaunt or I Am the Doorway, Tommy Knockers, didn't like Under the Dome or Dreamcatcher very much, but this is in a lot of ways on par with Under the Dome for me, as far as just being kind of lackluster in a lot of ways, but still having some enjoyable merit. So I'm going to take one brief last look at the chat before I announce the book of the month, everybody. So yes, this is once again something that we do the first Saturday of every month. And that is going to be changing, though, here in a couple months, because in May, the horror show is launching our next phase, basically. So we're doing a full channel relaunch, and Cecil has planned for me to move this program from Saturdays to Fridays. I don't necessarily know how that's going to work for a monthly live stream, because I know a lot of people work during the daytime. So maybe it'll be like a late afternoon, evening sort of stream as opposed to earlier in the day. This is the exception to the rule today, where we started significantly earlier than normal, but that's just because I gotta get out for some filming, and the band is out back and whatever. But okay, Philip Kruger says, just wanted to say love your channel. Philip, thank you so very much. Humbled and honored. I feel like I speak for the founder of the Feast, Cecil, myself, Marcia, Susie, Robert, the entire gang. We greatly appreciate you stopping by to say hi, man. And hey, Jacob, you have a good day as well, brother. Much love to you. Hope everything is going great across the pond. Corey W. also says, also thought it was cool. He wrote this longhand, and in one instance by candlelight when the power went out. Yeah, I thought that was most definitely intriguing as well. Like, once again, writing a 600+ page book in cursive, god damn, like that is a respectable effort. Mikey, you take it easy as well, man. Josh Murray says, love your channel, love this segment, best comprehensive King coverage, love you, Fuego. Josh, I appreciate that very much, man. But so the book of the month is not Later. As I mentioned the other day when I was putting up the review of Later, and thanks to the 1,000+ peeps that checked out that review, Later was so short in its length that I decided not to make it the book of the month, because there is one that I have really, really been wanting to reread lately. And this is my old beat-up copy of the Bachman books. You can see it's all taped and stuff. I have my nicer copy over there that I found at a Goodwill about a year or so ago. But we are going to be talking for its 40th anniversary. We're talking Road Work. Yeah, Road Work is a Richard Bachman book from 1981. And it was actually brought up recently in the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group because somebody posed a question about just the nature of mental health and what sort of King books address that issue. Some peeps mention Rage, some peeps mention Blaze. Interesting how a lot of the Bachman stuff actually ties in with that. But Road Work here in the Bachman books is described as what happens when one good and angry man fights back his murder and then some. Road Work is It's very much a Bachman book. It is dark and depressing. It's basically about this guy who it feels like it's raining shit on him, between this road that they're basically wanting to tear down his house to go through. His mother has died. I believe he loses his job as well. So it is one that I have been wanting to revisit for a while, and now I have the excuse to do so. Road Work is available both in the Bachman books in hardcover and paperback, or it's also available, I'm pretty sure, as an individual novella. So on the first Saturday of April, that just to double check and let everybody know. So April 3rd, and I believe that is going to be the, if I'm not mistaken, the final Saturday live Hail to Stephen King book of the month before we switch to Fridays. But yes, Saturday, April 3rd is when we are going to be discussing for its 40th anniversary Road Work. So very excited about that. And I obviously extend a grande gracias to all of you. I have been Jaime Fuego, and you can find Walt on all social media sectors, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Letterboxd, where I do keep track of everything that I have watched for the last few years, if you're just curious about how I'm rating stuff and as far as films and stuff like that goes. This past weekend, I put up reviews of Raya and The Last Dragon, the new Disney movie, and I also put up a review of Coming to America. And later today, Cecil, Laird, and I are actually pretty stoked because of the fact that we are going to be doing a spoilers discussion about the WandaVision series from Disney+, the Marvel Studios bit. That was just bonkers nuts. I purposefully slept on it, and I watched the first 2 episodes, and I'm like, this is okay. I waited until the series finale hit yesterday, and I just binged the whole goddamn thing before I went and saw that shitty Chaos Walking movie. So, yes, I look forward to putting that up. Just jump over to Infuegotainment, or just youtube.com/JaimeInFuego, like my silly moniker goes. Obviously, a like, a share, a subscribe, all of the love here from Cecil and myself, and the rest of the gang is greatly appreciated. And yes, the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group is where we have constant palaver on the daily, over 1,000 members there. So not like a ginormous Ka-Tet, but great caffeine discussion palaver amongst everybody there. And it is always a humbling and honoring experience to hear the positive thoughts from all of you. I really relish these monthly meetings amongst all of us, and truly warms my heart. Maddie says, just Road Work. Yeah, just Road Work, man. I mean, yeah, it's basically there are so many different golden anniversaries that are right around now. It could have been the Green Mile. It could have been Road Work. It could have been various different things. I know Road Work is a little bit shorter. If you guys really want to have like a big spoilers discussion about later, along with Road Work, I mean, let it be known in the comments below. But yes, Maddie, it's just Road Work because I've been wanting to revisit that novel for quite a while. And next week is going to be the final bit of the unproduced segments from the stand, which Maddie is responsible for cluing me into those. And so it's going to be part 1 of Josh Boone's initial attempt in, I believe, 2014, 2015, to get a new version of The Stand off the ground. We have a full spoilers discussion of the recent version of The Stand, and also, just to double down later, my review with spoilers at the end is there. So that's going to be the end of the proceedings for today. I extend a grande gracias. I have been Jaime Fuego, as I mentioned, and until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, sin amigos, constant readers and viewers alike. Say thank you for spending some time and having some palaver with me today. I hope we share more of it sooner rather than later. And until then, stay scared and read Stephen King, because yes, the Road Work, he's coming. Yeah, this is a battered, beaten old copy, but yeah, still love it. Well, thanks everybody. I'll do my best. Lloyd here. Thanks, fellas. Appreciate y'all. Man, was that wolf kid just not the friggin' worst in that? My goodness. Anyway, guys, horror show. Much love.